The first thing I heard was the gate opening with a metallic groan, like the house was breathing before it swallowed me. I had the address written down twice, once in my phone notes, and once on a folded piece of paper inside my bag, as if repeating it would stop my hand from shaking when I pressed the doorbell. It was a quiet street. The kind where even the dogs seem well behaved, the kind of place where the air smells like trimmed grass and old money. I adjusted the strap of my backpack on my shoulder, felt the weight of my college notebook and pencil case hitting my back, and tried to remember why I was there. College, tuition, electric bill, that bill I had been pretending not to see for 3 days. Work. The second thing I heard was a soft cry, muffled, coming from inside, not desperate. Not loud, that it was small, fragile, the sound of someone learning how to exist. The door opened before I could think about knocking again. And that's when I saw Martha. It wasn't seeing like recognizing a face, like I did with professors in class, that it was seeing like my eyes had touched her. She was holding the baby, wrapped in a light cloth, her black hair tied in a low ponytail that didn't look styled. It looked like survival, that a loose strand had fallen near her ear, brushing her cheek, and she didn't have time to move it. The first thing that hit me was the exhaustion. The second was the beauty behind it. Her skin had that warm, pale tone, like porcelain that had seen sunlight. Her face was firm, but her eyes belonged to someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. A grayish green, like she was holding back an entire ocean from spilling over. And there was a scent too, clean. Expensive. Subtle, something between soap and perfume. A scent that didn't ask for attention, and because of that, took it. I swallowed. Martha looked at me like she was trying to remember a word in the middle of a dream. "You're Laura." Her voice came out low, hoarse, like it had been used too much to whisper and soothe. I nodded, trying to smile without looking nervous. She stepped aside to let me in. The house was bright, quiet, filled with straight lines and objects that matched each other, but the silence wasn't peace. That it was the kind of pause that happens right before someone slams a door. Light poured in through large windows, falling onto the floor like a sheet. Somewhere in the background, I heard a machine, maybe a washing machine, maybe air conditioning, keeping everything at a temperature that felt too perfect. Martha walked slowly, rocking the baby. I noticed details without meaning to: the ring on her finger, a discreet watch on her wrist, the way she twisted the ring whenever the baby stirred. Automatic. Anxious. I had seen mothers before. On the subway, in lines, at clinics. But this was different. Because this mother was my employer. And without asking permission, my body registered what it wasn't supposed to. The line of her shoulder beneath the tank top, the soft curve of her hips under the light fabric shorts, the strength in her neck when she lifted her chin to breathe. I forced myself to look at the baby. Did he just feed? I asked, professional, like I was holding my own head in place. Martha nodded and led me to the living room. The baby, Miguel, I knew from the contract, still had that slightly crumpled, sleepy face that he smelled like warm milk and soap. The kind of smell that makes you want to speak softly. His skin was soft, like a promise. Martha showed me everything: diapers, creams, bottles, cloths, the nursing chair, the nursery with its soft yellow light and a silent spinning mobile. In the hallway, a large framed photo. Martha and a man with a wide smile, his hand on her waist like he owned the frame. Paul. The name came with a sharp feeling I didn't understand yet. I absorbed instructions, routines, schedules, emergencies, that my rational mind doing its job. But behind that, there was another part of me, quieter, more instinctive, storing things. The way Martha pressed the baby's cloth against her chest, the way she held her breath for 2 seconds before answering anything, that delicate tension at the corner of her mouth, like she was always about to say no, and ended up saying, "It's fine." When Miguel finally fell asleep in the crib, Martha stayed there, watching him, like he was the only thing holding the world together. I felt a strange urge to touch her arm and tell her she could rest. But I didn't. I stayed in my place. Only. My place, I would soon realize, wasn't fixed. It was mid-morning that I was washing a bottle at the sink, the sound of running water muting everything, when I heard the front door open hard. Footsteps, keys hitting marble. A presence. Paul walked into the kitchen like someone entering a place that belonged to him. I turned my head slightly, keeping my hands busy, and saw a man dressed too well for a house in the middle of the day. Button-down shirt. A scent that arrived before he did. An easy smile. A not easy gaze. The kind of look that measures you in pieces. He looked at me like I was a question. And the answer he wanted was always the same. "So you're the nanny." Not a question. A statement, with a taste. My stomach tightened, but I held my posture. Martha appeared right behind him, like she had been pulled. I saw the shift in her body, her spine stiffening, her hand moving automatically to her ring, her gaze dropping. Paul stepped closer to the counter. Too close. "Laura, right?" He said my name like he was testing it on his tongue. I answered with the kind of politeness you learn out of necessity. He smiled wider. "New," he commented, scanning me up and down without even pretending not to. "Student?" I felt my breathing grow shallow. Martha moved. Paul. His name in her mouth didn't sound like affection. It sounded like a warning. He raised his hands like he had done nothing. "What?" "I'm just being friendly." The word friendly sounded exactly like I can. I finished rinsing the bottle with too much care, like the strength in my hands might break the plastic. And that's when I felt it for the first time, the invisible thing between Martha and me. A tight thread. She looked at me. Just for a second. But in that second, I understood two things. First, she was embarrassed. Second, she had already decided she wouldn't leave me alone with him. That night, when Paul left again, without saying where. And Martha put Miguel to sleep, she called me into the living room. The house felt different, dimmer light. A TV playing some news channel no one was really watching, the faint smell of tea in the air. Martha sat down on the couch like every muscle was tired of existing. I stayed standing, waiting for instructions. She looked at me. And I saw something broken there, but shining underneath. "Starting tomorrow," she began, then stopped, like choosing words hurt. "I'll need you to come with me to some things. Appointments, groceries, pharmacy, everything." I blinked. "Of course. No problem." Martha nodded, but her eyes didn't leave mine. It felt like she wanted to say something more. But she didn't. She just breathed. And for the first time, I felt something that wasn't guilt, or doubt, or confusion about liking women. It was hunger. I wanted to touch her. I wanted to understand what kind of silence existed between us. I wanted to be the place where she rested. The next day, I went out with them. Martha drove a large car, the inside smelling like leather and her perfume, a combination that kept me strangely alert. Miguel was in the back seat, strapped into his chair. I sat beside him, sideways, holding the diaper bag. Martha drove with both hands on the wheel, posture flawless, like controlling the car was the only thing she could control. I watched her profile through the rearview mirror. Her firm jaw, long lashes, pressed lips, and that strand of hair that refused to stay in place. Traffic moved in fragments. I gently rocked Miguel, feeling the warmth of his body through the blanket. At the clinic, the air smelled like alcohol and strong air conditioning. Martha held Miguel and answered the pediatrician's questions with trained patience. I stayed beside her, handing documents, passing cloths, holding the bag. At some point, the doctor mentioned something about exhaustion. And about the father. Martha smiled, but only with her lips. I saw it, not as judgment, as truth. When we stepped outside, already in the parking lot, the sun hit hard. Martha narrowed her eyes, uncomfortable. She tried to adjust Miguel's blanket and, for a second, she fumbled. I moved closer on instinct and fixed the blanket for her. Our fingers touched. It was quick. But it felt like low electricity, running up my arm and settling in places that had nothing to do with my arm. Martha stopped. So did I. The world went quiet for a second, despite the noise of cars and people around us. She looked up at me. I didn't look away. It wasn't guilt. It was courage. And right there, in the middle of that parking lot, I saw something pass across her face, like she had suddenly remembered she was still a woman. Not just a mother, not just a wife. A woman. She took a deep breath and stepped back. Her ring caught the sunlight. And that hurt in a strange way, not jealousy. A limit. On the way back, Miguel fell asleep, and the car felt like it was floating through the avenue. Martha spoke to me about practical things, but I only answered what was necessary. Because every time she turned her face slightly, every time the light traced the line of her nose, I felt my body react like it was betraying me. And at the same time, like it was the most natural thing in the world. At home, Paul wasn't there. And his absence felt like relief, with the taste of danger. The weeks unfolded like that. Martha taking me with her. And me being pulled closer, slowly. I started to learn her versions. Martha the mother, soft voice for the baby, smiling with her eyes when Miguel wrapped his fingers around hers. Martha the employer, thanking me with formality, but sometimes forgetting, and looking at me like I mattered. Martha the woman, showing up in involuntary details. When she rubbed lotion into her arm and closed her eyes for a second, when she tied her hair and left her neck exposed, when she laughed quietly at something small, and the laugh felt like a secret. And me. I started collecting those moments. Like someone collecting matches next to gasoline. One warm afternoon, I was in Miguel's room, the end of day light pouring in orange through the curtains, when Martha appeared at the doorway. She didn't knock. She just stood there. I turned my head. And felt the impact of seeing her without armor. Loose t-shirt, hair down, and a kind of exhaustion so visible it almost had weight. She walked in slowly and approached the crib. Miguel slept, his small breathing filling the room. Martha watched him for too long. I stayed quiet. The silence between us, in that moment, wasn't empty. It was full. Full of everything we weren't saying. She brought her hand to her throat, like something inside was tightening. And I felt an almost ridiculous urge to touch her there, as if I could ease it. That's when we stood too close. I don't know who moved first. I only know that, when I realized it, Martha was beside me, so close I could feel her warmth. And her scent. That clean, expensive scent, now mixed with something human, light sweat, skin, life. I breathed in without meaning to. And that was a mistake. Because I felt it enter me, and spread. Martha turned her head. Our eyes met. Her pupils were slightly wider. I saw her throat move in a dry swallow. And I understood something simple, and devastating. She felt it too. I stayed still. Because I knew that any movement from me could become an excuse for her to leave, or an excuse for her to stay. The air grew heavier. And when she said my name, it was so soft it almost didn't exist. But it existed in exactly the right place. Laura. I swear I tried to stay rational. But my body, in that moment, was faster. I lifted my hand slowly, like testing warm water, and lightly touched her wrist, just enough to feel her skin. Martha didn't pull away. The baby breathed, unaware. The whole house seemed to hold its breath with us. I moved my hand slightly, barely a centimeter. That's when Martha closed her eyes. And in that gesture, I lost something I didn't even know I had. Control. She opened them again. And the way she looked at me wasn't employer. Wasn't mother. It was a woman looking at another woman. Like she remembered she had hunger. My heart was beating in my throat. Her voice came out in a whisper that sent a shiver through me. You can't, she said, but the sentence died before becoming a prohibition. Because her body didn't agree with her words. I stepped closer, just enough for the space between us to turn into a threat. I saw her mouth. So close. And I wanted. With a clean clarity. No guilt. No fear of what I was. The fear was, what it would cause. Then I heard a sound in the hallway, a creak, like wood shifting. Martha froze. So did I. It wasn't loud. But it was enough to tear the moment apart. She stepped back quickly, like she had remembered the outside world. Her ring appeared again, faintly reflecting the orange light of the room. She breathed, trying to become Martha again. My hand stayed in the air for a second, feeling the absence where her skin had been. The hallway fell silent again. I could hear my blood in my ears. Martha ran a hand over her face, like she was trying to erase something. Then her phone vibrated. The sound cut sharply through the silence. She looked at the screen. Her face changed. It wasn't just irritation. It was fear. Even from a distance, I saw the name. Paul. Martha tightened her grip on the phone, like she could crush the message. And in a low, broken voice, almost to herself, she said, "He's coming." The room seemed to shrink. I looked at Miguel, asleep. So small. Then at Martha. And I knew, with a certainty that tightened my chest. From that moment on, nothing I felt for her would ever fit back into a box. I had just touched my employer's wrist like someone striking a match. And the smell of smoke was already in the air. "He's coming," hung in the room like the smell of gas. For a second, I didn't move. Not out of fear of Paul himself, I barely knew the man. But because of what he represented. The weight of the real world crashing down on a moment that, until now, had only been ours. Martha picked Miguel up from the crib with movements that were too fast, like she needed to keep her hands busy so they wouldn't shake. The baby stayed asleep, unaware, his lips forming a tiny pout that looked like a dream. I stepped back, instinctively. The distance hurt. Martha gave me a quick glance, almost pleading. Not, "Help me. Don't leave me alone in this." She passed me in the hallway, already pressing her phone into her palm. I followed her with the feeling that the whole house had changed temperature. The air felt colder. More metallic. Like Paul's arrival dimmed the light and sharpened the risk. I walked into the living room. And when I heard the key turning in the door, my whole body went alert. Paul entered like always. A large presence, a ready smile, his scent arriving before his voice. He looked straight at me. His gaze moved slowly. Unhurried, like he had every right to measure me again. I held his gaze. Not out of bravery. Out of instinct. Because I had a life to pay for, and a line to hold. Martha appeared from the kitchen, Miguel in her arms. And I swear I saw Paul's mood shift. He smiled wider. But it was a sharper smile. You two were, together? He asked. And the question came with something thick underneath it. Martha didn't blink. Miguel needed to sleep. Paul shrugged, like it didn't matter. But his eyes stayed on me. And you, getting used to it? He said. And the you felt like it was trying to pull me somewhere. I answered with the minimum. Steady voice. He let out a low laugh. I like polite people. Martha held Miguel tighter. I saw her jaw lock. Paul stepped closer to her and leaned in to kiss the baby's forehead. But the gesture felt less like affection, and more like proof he could touch. Martha turned her face slightly. Subtle. But it was a no. And I saw his reaction. A microtension at the corner of his mouth. Like someone who hates losing control. That night, I left with a weight in my chest that wasn't just fear. It was certainty. That Paul was going to start noticing things, even the ones that hadn't happened. I got to my room, opened my college notebook, stared at the words, and read nothing. Because my body was still stuck in the memory of a touch on her wrist. Of a second where she closed her eyes. It was like my day had two layers. The layer of diapers, schedules, tasks, and the hidden layer, where Martha breathed too close. In the days that followed, Martha didn't let me out of her shadow. Appointments, groceries, pharmacy, bank, quick walks in the park with the baby covered in the stroller. Always with me, always Miguel, always the perfect excuse. And I understood quickly. It wasn't just to protect me from Paul. It was to protect herself. Because when Paul wasn't there, Martha loosened. Like a rope that had been pulled too tight, and suddenly finds silence. I started noticing the small things she did when she was away from him. She breathed deeper. She spoke to me in full sentences, without that constant care of saying too much. Sometimes, she even laughed. Small things, Miguel spitting up milk, a woman at the market making a joke, the stroller getting stuck on the sidewalk. She laughed softly. But she laughed. And every time she did. It was like she remembered she still had a body. And me. I got lost in that. No guilt. No internal drama about, can I or can't I like a woman? I could. The problem was, I could want a woman who wasn't free. I could want a woman who, on the outside, still belonged to a marriage. And I could want it so much, it started to hurt. One afternoon, coming back from the supermarket, Miguel was asleep in the stroller, and the heavy bag cut into my hand. Martha opened the door, and I walked in behind her. The house was quiet. Paul wasn't back. Martha dropped the keys on the counter with a dry sound, like throwing away something that bothered her. And she just stood there, staring at nothing. I set the bags down and asked with my eyes, "Are you okay?" She didn't answer. She just turned her head toward me. Slowly. And for the first time, I saw anger inside the exhaustion. She ran her fingers over her ring. Twisted it again, stopped. And then, she took it off. The ring slid off her finger like it was a piece of skin. She placed it on the counter, next to the keys, and stared at it like it didn't belong in that house. My heart started beating faster. Almost like guilt. But it wasn't guilt for desire. It was guilt for hope. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Because there are moments when any word becomes a dangerous bridge. Martha took a deep breath and picked up the ring again. She didn't put it back on. She just closed her hand around it. And then she walked into Miguel's room, like nothing had happened. But it had. From that day on, I watched Martha begin to disconnect from Paul in invisible ways. She didn't reply to his messages right away. She stopped trying to keep the house ready for him. She didn't laugh at his jokes. And most of all, she started looking at me more. Not the look of an employer evaluating. A look that finds. I felt it in the smallest things. In the way she called me when she needed help, not Laura as an order, but like someone calling a real person. In the way she lingered at Miguel's door after I put him to sleep, like she wanted to stay there a little longer with me. In the way she started asking about my college, my plans, where I grew up. And I answered, trying to stay grounded. But inside, I was fabric catching fire slowly. One rainy night, Paul came home earlier. Rain hit the windows hard, and the house smelled like damp clothes and soup Martha hadn't eaten. I was in the living room with Miguel in my arms, rocking him gently. Martha was in the kitchen, washing something with too much force. When Paul walked in, I felt the atmosphere shift. Like someone had turned down the volume of life. He looked at Miguel. Then at me. "Where's Martha?" he asked. "No, good evening." "Nothing." Martha appeared at the kitchen doorway, cloth in hand, eyes dry. Paul stepped close to her. Too close. He said something I couldn't hear, but I saw her face harden. She answered quietly, her voice carrying a thread of steel. Paul laughed. No humor in it. Then he looked at me again, like I was part of the conversation. I lowered my eyes to the baby. Not out of submission. Because I couldn't give him ammunition. But when Paul walked past me, I felt him lean slightly closer, too close. Like he was about to whisper. My body went rigid. And that's when Martha snapped. Not with a shout. Worse. With coldness. No. The word fell like glass breaking. Don't do that. Paul stopped. Looked at her. I saw irritation rise in him. Do what? Martha tilted her chin, minimal but firm. Respect me inside my house. The sentence stayed in the air. And my stomach dropped. Because I understood what she had done. She had called that house mine. Not ours. Not the family's. Mine. Paul smiled slowly, like he was memorizing a threat. We'll talk later. Martha didn't respond. She just took Miguel from my arms, gently, like the baby was too sacred to stay in that tension. And walked down the hallway. I stayed in the living room, listening to the rain, to Paul's heavy footsteps moving somewhere deeper into the house. My whole body was shaking. And it wasn't just fear. It was admiration. It was desire. Because watching Martha say, no, did something to me I didn't want to name. Later, when Paul came out, showered, changed shirt, face like nothing had happened, he gave me a long look. Laura, he said my name with false politeness. Can you stay later tomorrow? I have a commitment. I felt the ground shift beneath me. Before I could answer, Martha appeared again. Hair still damp, Miguel asleep in her arms, expression controlled. No. Simple. She can't. Paul looked at Martha like she had spat on the table. I'm talking to her. Martha didn't raise her voice. I'm answering. She leaves at her time. Paul let out a short laugh. No humor. You a union rep now? Martha held steady. I'm a mother. Silence. The rain sounded louder. Paul clenched his jaw and walked off, slamming a door somewhere. I stood there, frozen, heart racing. Martha stayed too. Just the two of us in the living room. The baby asleep. The house shaking on the inside. That's when I realized. Martha was choosing to protect me. And in doing that, she was stepping away from him. She looked at me like she was ashamed of what had just happened in front of me. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to be. That it had been beautiful. But I didn't. Because I knew. If I opened my mouth, would open my entire heart. Martha took a breath and started walking toward the hallway. When she passed by me, my body moved before reason. I reached out just slightly, and my fingers brushed her elbow. A minimal touch. A signal. I'm here. Martha stopped. She didn't turn immediately. She stood still, like she could feel her own blood changing rhythm. Then she turned. Her eyes met mine with an intensity that took the air out of me. She didn't say anything. She just stepped closer. And then another. Until she was so close the air between us became something alive. The baby slept, heavy in her arms, face pressed to her chest like that chest was the center of the world. Martha was warm. I could feel it. I looked at her mouth, without meaning to. Then back to her eyes. I saw a decision being born, and dying at the same time inside her. My skin rose in goosebumps. Martha tilted her face slightly, almost like she was about to rest her forehead against mine. And stopped a centimeter away. I felt her breath. Soft. And my whole body tightened with desire. Not aggressive. A kind of desire that pleads. That pulls slowly. That wants to stay. She closed her eyes for a second. Opened them. And then, in a voice so low it felt like a secret, she said, "Don't do this to me." I didn't answer with words. Because words would lie. I breathed. And took a step back. The retreat was a bitter victory. Martha looked at me like I had just saved us both from a fire. And at the same time, like I had lit it. She walked past me, went into Miguel's room, and closed the door too carefully, like the sound might wake not the baby, but her guilt. I left with my whole body aching with want. And that's when I understood. Martha wasn't losing herself in the closeness because she was weak. But because, with me, she could breathe. The following week, Martha started taking me even to things that didn't require me. A bakery, just to get fresh bread. A drive, just so Miguel could sleep better. A cafe. Quiet, spaced out tables, golden light falling in and making her face look younger for a moment. I sat with the baby beside me. Martha held her cup, staring into it like she was searching for courage at the bottom. She talked about neutral things. But her body said everything she didn't. Her foot brushed mine under the table. She played with the necklace at her collar. She looked at me too long, and looked away too late. And inside, I was always on the edge. Her phone would vibrate sometimes. Paul. She would look. Sigh. Ignore it. I saw. And every ignored vibration was a step away. One afternoon, I arrived and found Martha in her bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, Miguel in a portable crib beside her. The room smelled like lotion and clean clothes. The light was dim because of the rain outside. Martha held an open envelope. Papers. She didn't even look up when I entered. I stayed by the door, unsure if I could come in. Martha spoke without looking at me. Do you know what this is? I stepped closer, slowly, respecting the space. She lifted one of the papers, a bill, a bank statement, something like that. I'm organizing everything, she said, and her voice faltered halfway through, like her body had given up holding it together. My throat tightened. Martha finally looked at me. And what I saw there wasn't desire. It was fear. But a different kind of fear. The kind of someone about to jump. I'm thinking about separating, she said. The sentence felt too heavy for the air. My world tilted. Not because of victory. Because of gravity. Separation meant risk, conflict, people talking, people judging. And Paul. Paul wasn't the kind of man who let go easily. Martha continued, like the thought had been trapped and now had to come out. I can't do this anymore. She stopped, swallowed hard. I'm tired of pretending. I stayed quiet. Because I knew. This wasn't the moment to put my desire on the table. This was the moment to be ground. I moved a little closer and sat in the chair near the bed, without invading. Martha held the papers tighter, crumpling the edge. He's going to, she started. Didn't finish. But I understood. My body heated with a cold, organized anger. Martha closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, she looked older. I don't want him touching you again, she said. And that hit me in a strange way. Because it wasn't just protection. It was possession. It was care. It was fear of losing. I breathed slowly, my voice low and steady. He won't. Martha looked at me like she wanted to believe it. The silence grew. Miguel made a small sound in the crib, like a sigh, and fell back into sleep. Martha dropped the papers onto the bed and covered her face with her hands. I saw her shoulders shake. I stood up slowly, without thinking, and moved closer. Not as a nanny. As a woman. I knelt in front of her, gently, and placed my hand over hers. First contact again, deliberate, unhurried. Martha didn't pull away. She let me. The warmth of her skin traveled into me like a current. I felt her breathing change, shorter. She lowered her hands. Our eyes met. Close. Too close. There was something in her gaze that wasn't just sadness. It was hunger. I stayed still. Waiting. Martha raised her hand and touched my face. First with her fingertips, like she was testing if I was real. Then with her whole palm. Like she was tired of pretending she didn't need it. My entire body responded. I didn't move away. Martha rested her forehead against mine. I felt the slightest tremor in her, like, inside, she was collapsing and rebuilding at the same time. And then. She pressed her lips to mine. It was a short kiss. Restrained at a kiss that felt like it was asking permission. I answered. Not with urgency. With presence. My hand moved up to her wrist, just like in Miguel's room, only now, it wasn't almost. It was yes. The kiss deepened. Warmer, the world disappeared, and for a few seconds I existed only in her taste, soft, clean, with a trace of tea, and exhaustion. Martha let out a quiet sound, involuntary, like her body had remembered something she had buried. I felt her hand slide from my cheek to my neck, holding gently, pulling me a little closer. The kiss grew intense, the kind that makes your whole skin come alive. I felt my blood racing, and I knew, physically, that if I took one more step, I wouldn't stop. Martha knew it too. She pulled back a fraction, breathing harder, her lips still close to mine, and whispered. I can't, not like this. It wasn't rejection. It was panic, responsibility, fear of how big this was becoming. I brushed my lips against her cheek, right near her mouth, like saying, I understand, without words. My hands stayed where they could stay without crossing any line she hadn't asked me to cross. Holding, steadying, not taking. Martha closed her eyes, and a tear slipped down quickly, like anger at herself. I leaned my forehead against hers again. Just that. Breath with breath, warmth with warmth. The baby sleeping beside us, reminding us of everything that existed beyond desire. Martha opened her eyes. They were wet, and newly decided. I'm going to separate. She said, like she was promising herself. I'm decided. My chest tightened. I wanted to say 1,000 things. I wanted to say I want you, that I wanted to say I'll wait for you, that I wanted to say I'll help you. But I chose the only sentence that didn't pressure her. Then we're going to do this the right way. Martha breathed like that sentence was water. And before pulling away, she kissed me again, quick, but so charged it left my whole body thirsty. She rested her forehead against mine once more, and I felt that was as much as she could handle without breaking. I stepped back slowly, carefully, like setting down a full glass. Martha ran her hand over her lips, like trying to understand what had just happened. And for the first time since I entered that house, I saw something on her face that wasn't just exhaustion. It was direction. That same day, Martha began to act. Not drama. Action. The kind of action that comes from a woman who has woken up. She made calls, filed documents into a folder, wrote down numbers, spoke on the phone in a low, steady voice. I didn't hear everything. But I heard enough. Lawyer, measures, baby. Paul arrived that night and found a different Martha. She didn't smile, she didn't pretend, she answered directly, without softening her tone. And he noticed. I saw it in his eyes, that mix of surprise and anger that comes with losing control. He tried to look at me the way he had before. But now, I wasn't alone. Even when Martha wasn't in the same room, I felt her presence like a hand on my shoulder. And Paul felt it too. When it was time for me to leave, Martha walked me to the gate with Miguel in her arms. The street was damp, smelling like wet asphalt, and the streetlights softened her face. We stood there for a moment, silent. The baby slept. The house behind us felt like a trapped animal. Martha looked at me with eyes that now held something new. Growing courage. She didn't say, thank you. She didn't say, sorry. She didn't say, good night. She just stepped closer, very close. And pressed her lips near my ear. A gesture so intimate my entire body lit up. And she whispered, barely audible. Tomorrow, stay close to me. I swallowed. Nodded. And walked away with the feeling that I was crossing a line that had no return. Not because I feared what I was. But because I knew exactly what I wanted. And now, I knew Martha wanted it too. She just needed to free herself from the man who believed she was his property. And me. I would be close enough to feel every step she took away from him. Close enough to lose myself with her. Close enough that, when she finally let go, I would be there. Not as a nanny. As a woman. The night after, Stay Close to Me, was the longest of my life. Not because I was afraid of myself. I knew exactly who I was. What I wanted, what my body did when it remembered Martha's mouth. I was afraid of what Paul might do when he realized he was losing. The next morning, I woke with a bad feeling at the back of my neck, like someone had whispered my name in my sleep. I showered quickly, tied my hair into a tight bun, put on my most neutral clothes, as if fabric could be armor, and went. The street was gray, carrying that smell of old rain clinging to the asphalt. When the gate opened, I felt the house before I saw it. The same clean perfection, with a new tension running through it. Martha opened the door with Miguel in her arms. The baby was awake, wide-eyed, making a small sound that felt like a word without language. And Martha was different. Not makeup, not clothes. Posture. She wore a simple white shirt and jeans, hair tied back, and a look that didn't apologize for existing. When she saw me, her eyes softened, just for half a second. Enough for me to feel it. Then she turned her face, like remembering the world. "He's still here," she murmured, barely moving her lips. My heart jumped. I nodded. She led me inside without touching me, but I felt like she was holding me from within, guiding me through an invisible line. Paul appeared in the hallway, mug in hand, like he owned the silence. He looked at me and smiled. Not joy. A warning. "Good morning, Laura." His voice came too sweet. "Sleep well?" My hand wanted to close into a fist, but I kept it relaxed. I breathed. Martha spoke before I had to. "Paul, I need to talk to you today." Simple. Firm. He looked at her with performative boredom. "Now?" Martha didn't blink. "Today." Paul took a slow sip, watching me over the rim of the mug, like I was part of a conversation already forming in his head. "After my meeting," he said, walking away. "We'll talk." When he disappeared, I let the air out slowly. Martha stood still, eyes fixed somewhere, like she was holding something inside her chest to keep from shaking. I stepped closer. Didn't touch. Just close enough for her to feel I was there. She turned to me. Her voice came low, slightly broken. "If he says anything to you, don't answer. Call me." I nodded. Miguel moved his tiny hands, and I forced myself to smile at him, like life was normal. Like I didn't have a lit match in my pocket. The morning was slow. Miguel needed changing, feeding, sleeping, waking, crying for no reason, calming with a sound I made without thinking, a soft, shoot like wind. Martha stayed close the whole time. Not watching me as an employer. Guarding me. And that moved something dangerous inside me. Because every time she passed behind me in the hallway and her perfume brushed the air I breathed, I remembered the room. The kiss. The whisper. The way she said, "Tomorrow." The way her hand trembled on my face. And the desire inside me wasn't a monster. It was a river. Rising slowly. Certain to overflow. It was mid-afternoon when Paul came back. The door slammed open. Heavy steps. A dense energy, like he had dragged the outside world into that immaculate house. I was in the living room, Miguel in my arms, trying to burp him. Martha was in the kitchen, and I heard cutlery, like she was organizing small things to avoid thinking about the big one. Paul stepped in. Saw me. Stopped. "Alone?" he asked. The words slipped like oil. I didn't answer. He moved closer. Slow. My whole body went alert. Not pure fear. Survival. "You're a smart girl, right, Laura?" he continued, voice low. "College, effort, you wouldn't want to get involved where you shouldn't." Miguel shifted in my arms. I adjusted his blanket calmly. Held onto him like something sacred. Paul leaned in slightly. Too close. Martha is fragile, he said, like she was an object. She confuses things. My stomach twisted. I stayed silent. He let out a short laugh. Not talking? Scared? Or do you think you've already won something? That's when Martha appeared at the kitchen doorway. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence was like a cold blade at his throat. Paul. Now. He straightened, smile ready again. Of course, love. The word love came out like mockery. Martha walked down the hallway. He followed. The office door closed. I stayed in the living room with the baby. And a silence that was too large. I didn't hear everything. But I heard tones. Martha's firmness. Paul trying to laugh. His voice rising. You're crazy, that cut through the wall like a strike. And then. Silence. A silence so absolute my blood went cold. The door opened. Martha came out first. Her face was pale. But her eyes were lit. Not hysteria. Decision. Paul came out right after. Red. Jaw tight. Smile gone. He looked at me one last time in that hallway. And I understood. He had understood. It wasn't the nanny. It was that Martha was slipping out of his reach. And when someone like him loses control, they grab harder. Paul grabbed his keys, muttered something about taking care of things, and left, slamming the door hard enough to startle Miguel in my arms. I stood, rocking the baby, whispering softly, calming him. And that's when I saw Martha standing in the middle of the room. Like her body didn't know where to go now that she had said what needed to be said. She didn't cry. She breathed. A deep breath. Like she was releasing something she had carried for years. I placed Miguel gently in the crib and came back. She was still there. Afternoon light filtering in, dust floating in the air like the world had paused. She looked at me. And I saw her fear. Not of me, not of desire. Of what comes after. Her voice was low. I told him I want to separate. My chest tightened. I wanted to say finally. But I held it. Because this wasn't victory. This was the beginning of a battle. She continued. He laughed. Then he threatened. Then she stopped, swallowed. Then he tried to make me feel ridiculous. Her hand moved instinctively toward her ring. And found nothing. She looked at her hand like it was proof. I've already spoken to a lawyer. She said. Anne. I'm going to ask for a measure to keep him away when he's unstable. For Miguel. The baby's name made her voice falter, just slightly. I felt a wave of respect so strong it almost hurt. I didn't rush. I didn't invade. I just moved close enough so she wouldn't feel alone. Martha closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked exhausted and alive. I didn't want to drag you into this. I breathed slowly. He dragged you into this a long time ago. She let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, not quite a cry. Relief with pain. She looked at Miguel, sleeping again. Then back at me. And that's when the closeness shifted. No Paul.no noise. Just the house, the baby, the warm light. And us. Martha lifted her hand slowly and touched my wrist. The same place. The place of the first match. She did it like she was asking permission from my body. And I let her. Her skin was warm. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would break through my throat. She leaned closer. Slow. Careful. Like any sudden movement could break the courage she had built. And then she kissed me. This time. It wasn't asking permission. It was claiming need. The world disappeared again, but differently. Not just desire. Choice. Martha pulled me slightly closer, her body brushing mine carefully. Like she was relearning her own weight. The kiss deepened. Warmer. And I felt her breath falter for a moment, like she wasn't used to being touched without obligation. My hand moved to her waist. Steady. Present. No rush. Martha let out a soft sound against my mouth, and my entire body ignited, like I had been made for that. She pulled back for a second, forehead against mine, and whispered, not in my ear this time, but between our lips. I thought about you all night. I closed my eyes, breath catching. My voice came out low. I think about you all the time. Martha trembled. A small, honest tremor. She kissed me again. And I felt it. Almost, becoming now. I felt the edge approaching. That point where the body asks for more than the world allows. And Martha stopped. Not because she didn't want to. Because she was responsible. She rested her forehead against mine again, breathing hard, and said, voice breaking between desire and clarity. I want to. But I need to do this the right way. I need to really leave first. That sentence felt like proof of love. I opened my eyes and looked at her. I wasn't being hidden. I wasn't an escape. I was being chosen. Carefully. I nodded. My body ached agreeing. But my dignity breathed. I'll wait. Martha smiled. Small. Like she had forgotten how. Don't let me go back. I touched her cheek, steady, and said, I won't. That night, Paul didn't come back. And I suspected it was strategy. Disappearing. To let fear grow in silence. Martha locked the house. Checked twice. Placed a spare key somewhere I noticed. Turned on the alarm. And I stayed. Not as a nanny doing overtime. As someone who wouldn't leave her alone with her own trembling. Miguel slept in his room, soft yellow light. We stayed in the kitchen. Cold overhead light. A cup of tea that went untouched. Martha organized papers. I watched. Each sentence she spoke felt like a brick being laid. Tomorrow I'll go to the police. Then I'll call my parents. Then I'll change passwords. Then I'll ask him to leave. She said, then, like someone who finally saw a future. At one point, she stopped. Looked at her hand. I knew what she was thinking. I didn't ask. I just extended my hand across the table. She looked. Hesitated. Placed hers in mine. Simple gesture. But it held a world. That silence in the kitchen. Had no fear. Only courage. 2 days later, Paul came back wearing the mask. Flowers in hand. Big, ridiculous flowers, like size could compensate for history. I was in the living room with Miguel when the doorbell rang. Martha appeared with her phone in hand, expression firm. She checked the intercom. I saw her shoulder tense. Paul, outside, looked like a commercial for a repentant husband. She didn't open the gate. Her voice through the intercom was low and final. Go away. I heard his voice, muffled, trying. Martha, stop this. Let's talk. Martha held the intercom with the hand that didn't tremble. We already talked in the office. I've spoken to my lawyer. Go away. Silence. And then, his voice changed. Lower. Sharper. Is this because of her? Martha didn't look at me. But I felt it, in the way she breathed, that it hit her. She answered without raising her voice. This is because of me. That sentence landed like a beautiful strike. The kind I wanted to keep somewhere safe inside my body. Paul laughed outside. No humor. You're making a mistake. Martha closed her eyes for a second. Opened them. Go away, Paul. Now. The doorbell rang again. Once, twice, 3 times. Insistent. Miguel stirred in my arms, bothered by the sound. Martha pressed a hand to her chest, breathed in deeply. And then did something I had never seen a woman like her do. She didn't beg. She didn't explain. She called for help. She dialed a number, spoke briefly, and I caught only fragments. Address, name, not respecting, I have a baby. Paul stayed outside for a few minutes, switching between sweetness and threat. Martha didn't open the door. And when he realized he wouldn't win, not with shouting, not with performance, he left. The car pulled away with an irritated growl, splashing water from the street. The house fell silent again. And this time, the silence didn't feel like danger. It felt like space. Martha let out a breath like someone learning to breathe again after years. She rested her forehead against the wall for a moment. I walked toward her slowly. She turned her face to me. Her eyes were wet. But it wasn't defeat. It was relief. I did it, she whispered, like she couldn't quite believe it. I nodded. You did. Martha looked at Miguel in my arms, already drifting back to sleep, and then at me. And it was like she made a final decision right there, in the hallway, with the sound of the car fading in the distance. She ran her hand along my arm, slowly up to my shoulder, and pulled me closer. I felt her body press against mine with a quiet need. Martha kissed me. And the kiss tasted like victory, and fear, and promise. I answered with everything I had been holding since the first day. The kiss was intense enough to make my head feel light. Her hand held my face, not force. Certainty. She pulled back a fraction, brushed her lips near my ear, and whispered like a confession. I don't want to go back. My entire skin shivered. I closed my eyes and whispered back. Then don't. Martha let out a soft sound, like my words had opened something inside her. She kissed me again. The world became small, warm, close. And I felt it. Almost, was over. I knew that if we went any further, it wouldn't be just a kiss. Not just a promise. My hand tightened slightly at her waist. She responded with a tremor that set me on fire. But Miguel shifted in my arms, let out a small sound, and opened one eye. The world returned. Martha rested her forehead against mine and let out a quiet laugh, half something else. He always comes back at the wrong time, doesn't he? She murmured, glancing at the baby. I smiled, breathing unevenly. Thankfully. Martha looked at me. And in that look there was gratitude, desire. And something bigger. Future. She brushed her finger lightly along my cheek. When this is over, I'm going to want you in my life. For real. My chest tightened so much I could barely answer. I just nodded. But it wasn't a small nod. It carried everything. I'm here that I stay that I don't hide. The when this is over took a few weeks. Weeks of paperwork, signatures, difficult conversations, contained tears, and a kind of courage I watched Martha build every single day. Paul tried. With messages, with charm, with anger. But Martha had already crossed the point of no return. She didn't argue anymore. She stated. And slowly. He stopped knocking like he still had the right. The day he came to collect the last of his things. The air changed. He entered quickly, accompanied, no space for theater. He looked at me with silent hatred. And chose not to speak. Because now there were witnesses. Limits. Law. And above all, Martha standing. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't thank him. She just stood there, holding Miguel, watching a man leave her life. Like closing a door that had been open too long. When the door shut and the car drove away for good, Martha remained in the middle of the room. As if waiting to hear a shout that never came. I watched her body relax. Centimeter by centimeter. She looked around the house. Then at me. And she smiled. A full smile. For the first time. You, she started, and her voice broke. She stepped closer, Miguel in her arms, and touched my face. You stayed. I swallowed. I said I would. Martha let out a soft laugh, and it went through me like music. She kissed me there, in the living room, golden evening light pouring in. And the kiss had no urgency anymore. No panic. Just peace. A quiet now I can. She pulled back slightly and whispered. Tonight, stay. Just stay. Heat spread through my body. I nodded. And this time, there was no fear. Because it wasn't escape. It was a beginning. That night, the house felt different. The silence wasn't heavy. It was rest. Miguel slept in his room, the baby monitor humming softly, like a breath in the dark. The living room glowed with warm light. Martha came toward me, hair loose, still damp at the ends, wearing a soft t-shirt and simple shorts. No armor. No performance. Just Martha. She stopped in front of me like she was about to jump again. But now, with her eyes open. I stood still, feeling my heart beat exactly where it should. Martha stepped closer and touched my waist. Slow. Her touch was question and answer at the same time. I lifted my hand to her face. She closed her eyes for a second, like the touch was a prayer. And then she kissed me. Long. Warm. And my whole body answered. I pulled her closer, felt her heat, felt her breath falter. Martha pulled back slightly, looked into my eyes, and whispered with trembling courage. I want you. A shiver ran down my spine. My voice came low, steady. I'm here. Martha smiled, small, but real. And kissed me again, deeper. And while the world outside kept turning, unaware. I knew, with a clarity that almost made me cry. I wasn't just the nanny anymore. I was the place where she had become a woman again. And she was the place where I allowed my desire to exist without shrinking. The rest of that night wasn't noise. It was care. Presence. Two bodies learning each other, at the right pace, with the respect of people who had spent too long just surviving. And when I fell asleep, with the house quiet and the baby monitor breathing softly in the dark, I felt something I had never felt working for anyone before. I was home. The next morning, the sun came through the window like it was the first time. Miguel woke smiling, as if he had felt peace before knowing what peace was. Martha walked into the kitchen with faint dark circles, and a new light in her eyes. She looked at me. Didn't say anything. Just touched my hand. A simple touch. A quiet "I'm here." And I understood. The story hadn't ended because we had kissed. It ended because she had chosen herself. And I had learned not to settle for a hidden love. Martha looked at her son. Then at me. And said, with the calm of someone who finally believes in her own future, "We're going to be okay." I smiled. And for the first time since I touched that gate, I answered without fear. "We will."